Let me not mince my words here and hit you with the heavy-duty truth right off the bat. Amazon's The Rings of Power is currently the foremost battleground of the culture war and may very well be the decisive battle in the entire conflict. Bit of a strident analysis, you might think, but no, not at all. In fact, I will go one step further and say that this was Amazon's intention all along. Because, just like I made the point in the previous video, this is a $1 billion operation. There are no coincidences or accidents on such a scale, and the only reason to make a dwarf, an underground living people, black is for racial politics. It is literally the only singular sole reason for that decision, and the wokeists don't even bother trying to deny it. In fact, they have wholeheartedly embraced it, just like we must wholeheartedly reject it. So we're going to have a look here at an article, archived obviously, because The Gamer is one of the most rotten websites on the internet, and I heartily recommend you avoid it like a particularly virulent strain of syphilis. However, they do a remarkably good job of summing up the hateful wokeist position. They're a good repository of evil for later reference, shall we say. The Lord of the Rings of Power has people of colour. Get over it. Because again, there is no defense here. There is no law reason. There is no rationale for either of these characters, both of whom have been invented from whole cloth, to exist. They are made, again, purely for racial politics reasons. The reveal have come with a sadly predictable backlash from certain members of the community, the overwhelming majority, you mean. Show that Amazon series will include people of colour. Before we get any further, I want to make this clear, whether you're trolling, gatekeeping, plain old racist, or all of the above, you have now you have no place in this fandom, which is particularly amusing. If you're gatekeeping, we're gonna have to gatekeep you. Now, I've done an entire series on gatekeeping, so this will hardly come as a surprise to you, but the wokeists have never been anti-gatekeeping. They have been strident proponents of it from the first days, which is why we ended up in this position to begin with, because the rest of us wanted everyone to come in and enjoy our hobbies, to see the cool stuff we loved and enjoyed. That was a mistake, because turns out that a lot of people are simply just actually evil. Ismael Cruz Cordova plays the first elf color in any on-screen Tolkien adaptation. Not just on-screen, he is playing the first elf of color in Tolkien history, mind you. He is now confirmed to be a Sylvan elf, a grey elf, you know, the pale ones, and one of the story threads of the Rings of Power will follow his forbidden relationship with a human, Branwen, who is a single mother and a doctor. You couldn't make this any clearer. Amazon are beating you over the head with the woke script without reprieve or pause. It's sadly not surprising that comments are usually rooted in misogyny as well, referencing the dwarven princess. I've seen far more people complain about Sophia Nomwit's dwarf princess Disa, the first black dwarf in a Tolkien adaptation, in Tolkien in general, in total actually, than Cordova's elf or Henry's Harfoot, and this has to do with misogyny. Actually, if anything, it has to do with the opposite of that misandry, because the primary complaint is the fact that she is a beardless dwarf, and once again, I want to point out that this supposed Tolkien expert here, who's gone into great details discussing the non-canonical adoption of Galadriel's armor, has no comment whatsoever on the beardless dwarf. Again, I've made this point like 3-4 times now. The only reason they have made a Sylvan black elf and a beardless black dwarf is to hammer that home relentlessly. They want you to know that they are peeing all over Tolkien with these characters. It is a deliberate provocation, and we should respond to it. Because if we don't, well, we're doomed. Simple as. Pacifism is all well and good, but when you're under active attack, you've only got two options: resist or surrender. A lot of the criticism about hiring non-white actors stems from the premise that Tolkien was trying to create a mythology for Britain, which he was. In fact, he literally wrote that. Which Professor Tolkien wrote to Milton Baldwin in this. He described this idea to create a legend for England, and that Middle-earth is based on the climate and soil of the Northwest, meaning Britain and hither parts of Europe. How shall we twist this into a progressive narrative? We're not even gonna try, frankly, because we know what Tolkien meant. It is plain as goddamn day. Instead, we're gonna call upon a wokeist professor who will tell us that, you see here now, our vision of the historical realities of the Viking Age is wrong. There were black people everywhere, you see. Tolkien himself undoubtedly looked at the Shire and went, ah yes, an African community in little old England. I see. It's nonsense. It is so thorough, ridiculously nonsense as well, that it doesn't even require discussing. It is just, no, go away. Gatekeep. Slam the gate shut. And of course, Tolkien's work aren't free from criticism themselves, because this person isn't a fan. He is an anti-fan. This is a person who sees a fandom and goes, you know what? This would be good for me. I can sneak my way in here. I can insert my own politics. I can assert dominion by using my tactics, and then I can ruin all of it before moving on to the next one as the ginormous locust parasite I am. With the anti-Semitic stereotypes in his depiction of dwarves may have been written with good intention, but calling Jewish people gifted does not atone for the stereotypes he perpetuated. Excuse me. It's the modern day wokist again, of course. Now, the dwarves are a far more complex collage than just Jews, like the recent idea that wokists looked at the gnomes in Harry Potter and went, Jewish people. It's like when they look at orcs and go, blacks. There are racists in the room, that's for sure, but they're not quite where you think they are, as it turns out. At the end of the day, nothing in The Lord of the Rings needs to be historically accurate anyway. And here comes, of course, the cope. We begin by lying about history, and then we go, hold on, you're calling me on my bullshit, I see. Well, it doesn't really matter. It's just fantasy. It's made up. It doesn't matter. It's pointless. Really. I cannot be vociferous enough in rejecting and denouncing this ridiculous idea that, oh, it's fantasy, it doesn't matter. Okay, well, if it doesn't matter, go away. Leave us to our escapism. Leave us to our fantasy. Leave us to our universes. Leave. It doesn't matter to you, does it? It's you don't care, so why the hell are you still here? The door is that way. I loathe it. I'm not even going to argue the obvious fact that universes need canon. They need consistency. They need rules. They need a setting, because if you don't have a setting, you don't have a setting. Universes are built on fundaments, on key components. They are what makes up the greater whole, and they do matter because without them, you do not have a whole. All you have is 10,000 disconnected pieces of random garbage, which according to you again, doesn't matter. Idiocy. Then we go on to the usual aped excuse here. The Tolkien totally had a vision, leaving scope for other minds and hands, you see. Tolkien wanted people to come in and violently screw over his entire universe. That's weird, because I remember Tolkien being quite defensive about anyone adapting his work. That's damnably odd. It's almost as if what he intended was, yeah, I've created the rules, now you can tell stories within my universe. Not, hi, could you please deconstruct my entire setting and turn it into something completely different? Idiocy. The Rings of Power executive producer addressed the controversies of highly active colours in the Vanity Fair article, saying it felt only natural to us that adoption Tolkien's work would reflect what the world actually looks like. And Tolkien is for everyone, you see. Well, there's the thing. what the world actually looks like. You are adapting a work specifically intended to be a mythos, specifically intended to be mythology. In other words, allow me to translate this because I know you're a bit slow here, Mr. Wokey, or Miss Wokey, I guess. Fantasy means different than what the world actually looks like. This is where we are in 2022, when we need to point out that fantasy is not actually reality. And here is where the racists and gatekeepers really come undone. If you read The Lord of the Rings or any of his work, like really read, in other words, impose your interpretations on the act, on the work, beyond the fact that he once pointed out an elf has pale skin or whatever, like you need to really read his work beyond the fact that he points out things. You need to ignore that. You need to really read it. These are stories about people of different races overcoming the differences and working together for a common cause. That's correct. And nobody's arguing there shouldn't be dwarves or elves in Middle-earth. We are arguing they should be dwarves and elves, not Californians. And of course, we need to bring this up as well, because this is brought up every single time, where Sir Ian McKellen, the guy who played Gandalf, apparently received all kinds of homophobic hats. This was originally created by the OneRing.net and the fellowship thingy-bob, you know, the wokest organization, which are suddenly thinking, oh, you know, they received so much flack for casting a gay person as Gandalf, and whenever you ask them, hold on, where's this flack? Because I never saw any of it. Can you give us logs, chat rooms? Where was all this homophobic abuse? Silence. You know why? Because nobody cared. Absolutely, literally no one. Except for the rampant activists like, incidentally, Sir Ian McKellen himself. And here's the thing. Sir Ian is a great actor, and when he steps into a role, he puts his activism away and goes into the role, and that is incredibly respectful and something I wish a lot more actors would bloody do. But he is also an activist. Sir Ian is the person who he went into a talk with a politician because he disagreed with a bill. Now, most normal people don't get to talk to politicians when we disagree with a bill, but he did because he's an oppressed gay person, you see. And the person trying to explain, okay, you know, you and I disagree on this, I still think the bill is a good idea, but hey, my kids love you, okay? They love Gandalf. Could you please sign an autograph for them? Sir Ian accepted signing this autograph, and then he wrote, "Fuck you, I am gay," to the person's children. Because he's an activist. Absolutists. There are no greater evil than people who view the world in absolute. And again, all due respect to Sir Ian for his acting, but all bullshit aside, activists, by and large, can go screw themselves. This entire thing is, of course, a defense puff piece for the Lords of Power. Better name, I suppose. The Rings of Power. That comes out long before the show is actually even aired. On our side, the reason why we're criticizing it is because we can already see that it's not a Tolkien project, because it doesn't give two farts about Tolkien's work. Again, as I mentioned in the previous video, this is a co-opting, not an adapting of Tolkien's work. Obviously, this probably means it's going to be garbage. Whereas the defenses are all organized again around political and racial lines. Racial politics. You'd think we'd learned our lesson after the last roundabout some 60 odd years ago, but, or 70 more like now, it's been a while. But no, clearly not. And I'm going to make a more proper video on what can be done around this project, because I think the solution is not necessarily to not, acquire the Rings of Power through other sources, but rather to make the pushback as active and as vocal as possible. Because make no mistake, the normies are watching this. They are watching the discourse, they are watching the show, and a lot of people love Tolkien. This might just, again, as I mentioned, be the final battle. Our opportunity to cast the Ring of Woke into, if you'll forgive me, the Mount Doom. Until next time, I've been Art. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.